Hello, in this video I would like to discuss why I bought a camcorder, because it seems this day buying a camcorder over a system camera is a somewhat exotic buying decision, but I would like to explain why a camcorder can be a good purchase even today. So first let's look at the differences between camcorders and system cameras. Generally, camcorders and system cameras are not competitors, but complement each other in their application. In some areas, the boundary between the two is fluid, but in general, you can say that camcorders offer a compact, ready-to-go package, much like a point-and-shoot camera in stills photography. For all-round video recordings that do not have to meet very high or special requirements for the video quality, the camcorders will usually be a very good choice. And at least for this camera, the Canon XA50, I can say that you can take the footage straight out of camera for most applications. For YouTube, for sure, you can take it out of camera. A camcorder is your videographic system in itself, which is usually much cheaper than an equally functional set of a system camera. System cameras, on the other hand, are, as the name suggests, the camera part of a system. The components in this system to which the camera is connected largely define the properties of the system. These components can be kept small or they can be very large in size, weight and costs. And in order to get the full potential of a system camera, you will probably also have to work with the files afterwards. For the best possible video quality and for special applications, the system camera will be the better choice. So what are the requirements to actually take videos? To understand the differences between the camcorders and the system cameras,
you should know what you actually need for filming if you would use a system camera. I would like to show which components you would need with a system camera to get the same functionality as this Canon XA50 camcorder. First, obviously, you need the camera part, so the sensor with the image processor. In addition, then a suitable optic, some kind of lens. Also, you may want to have a video recorder, external maybe, or maybe you're happy with the internal. You will need some kind of display. Maybe the display on your system camera is good enough. Maybe you want an external display. The same with audio recorder. Maybe the internal audio recorder is fine enough for you. Maybe you want an external one. You will want to have some kind of microphone mount. You need the microphone itself, and you will need ND filters and some means to mount and exchange the ND filters. This shouldn't be with a screw mount, because this will be very cumbersome to change them fast. So you will need to get some kind of quick exchange ND filter holder. And you will maybe need some kind of cage where you can mount all of that together, because the body of the system camera is compact. It's not very big. It's not that big, so you probably want to have some kind of handle to get a proper hold of this whole setup. And you also may want to have an adapter for external batteries to support all the devices with energy. And such a setup can get really heavy and expensive, but of course it will give you Hollywood style image quality.
So you may ask, what do I need ND filters for? Unlike in stills photography, in videography, you cannot change the shutter speed at will without changing the looks of the image. Like in stills photography, there are three variables in video photography: the shutter speed, the aperture and the signal amplification. You will want to choose the aperture so that it is beneficial to the desired image effect. just like you do in stills photography. The shutter speed should be in harmony with the frame rate. As a rule, you take 1/50th second shutter speed with for a refresh rate of 25 frames per second, and 1/100th for 50 frames per second. Why? If you choose the shutter speed too long, the 25 frames per second are no longer maintained and the frame rate drops. And this becomes very, very visible. And the big image become increasingly blurred. If you choose a faster shutter speed, the movements will not appear smooth, but choppy and chopped up. The movement, like flapping of the wings of a bird, it doesn't look like it should. The signal amplification, it's called gain in videography or ISO setting in stills photography. With the signal amplification, you can brighten up the picture when there is not enough light. But what do you do when you have too much light? If your gain is at 0 or your ISO is at base ISO or below, and you have set your aperture and your shutter speed and it's still too bright, you want to make it darker, you cannot narrow the aperture or shorten the shutter speed without compromising the effect of the picture. In this case, you use the ND filters. ND stands for neutral density. This means that they reduce the brightness without in any way changing the color temperature or the brightness progression across the image. This less flexibility in shutter speed is the biggest difference in video recording photography compared to still photography. Once you understand this concept in practical application, you start to realize how important the ND filters actually are and how great it is to have them motorized, integrated in your camcorder. All of the parts mentioned for recording videos, the camera part, meaning sensor with image processor, suitable optics, video recorder, display or viewfinder, audio recorder, microphone and ND filters, are an integral part of the camcorder that are matched at the factory, while these components as part of a system camera must be selected, adjusted and be applied by the user himself. The high quality camcorder is therefore a worry-free point-and-shoot camera, while the system camera is a solution with a very high potential, but also which requires a lot of input from the user. The camcorder and the system cameras are therefore not competitors, but are two different tools which can be used parallel for their own specific purpose. For example, the system camera for general production and the camcorder for making of and spontaneous on-set interviews, etc. So you could say that the camcorder is a device for a one-man crew, where especially if you don't have full control of the subject, if you don't get a second chance, if you are documenting something, if you cannot control the action, the camcorder is probably your tool, because it makes it possible for one person to have a complete filming setup controlled in a fast way, in a flexible way. The system camera, on the other hand, is a more technical approach and needs a lot of adjustment and a lot of work, and gets its best results when in a controlled environment, where you can control the light, the action, where you can control what you are filming. If you have multiple persons which have their own part in the production, then the system camera will give you the best possible image quality. With a system camera, you can create in theory video quality like in a Hollywood movie. With a camcorder, you are somewhat limited in the image quality because of the smaller sensor size and because of the usually more limited video output files and bit depth. So now when we are talking about sensor sizes, most of the more notable differences between system cameras and camcorders is the sensor size. The system cameras are derived from 35mm cameras, and therefore they have sensors that correspond to the APS-C format, which is called super 35mm format in film, and the twice as large 35mm full frame format, which is called VistaVision in videography in movies. Most famous motion pictures were shot on the APS-C format, on the super 35mm format, which is roughly equivalent to the APS-C cameras. The 35mm film cameras themselves derive or are based on 35mm cinema film. But the format on the full frame stills camera is twice as large as the format on the 35mm movie camera. And that's because the film on the stills camera is running horizontally through the camera, and the very same film in a cinema camera is running vertically through the camera. So you see in the stills 35mm camera, the height of the image is limited by the width of the film, while in the 35mm movie cameras, the width of the image is limited by the width of the film. So although it is the very same film, because of a different orientation in the movie cameras, on a 35mm film you will get a format of APS-C, also called super 35mm format. On a stills camera, on the very same film, you will get twice as large format called the 35mm full frame, or in the movies they use a bigger film stripe to achieve this format, and they called it their VistaVision. So actually a full frame mirrorless camera has a usable surface which is twice as large as the classical 35mm movie camera. Camcorders, on the other hand, have sensor sizes between 1/3.2 inches or 1 inch size. This one has a 1 inch sensor. You may think that the diagonal of the sensor is 1 inch, but that's not the case. The name 1 inch derives from the outside diameter of electronic components which are used in old video cameras, but the 1 inch, this 1 inch camera, like it's called today, has a usable sensor size which resembles the film size of a super 16mm film. So traditionally camcorders have smaller sensors, and the 1 inch sensor is an unusual big sensor for a camcorder. Usually they have smaller sensors. So why do they use smaller sensors? On one hand, that's because they should be cheap and sensors are expensive. But that's only true for the cheap consumer camcorders. But they are also very expensive professional camcorders, and they still use small sensors. So why do they use small sensors on purpose? Because in the type of recording where camcorders are used, which is typically some kind of documentation or ENG. ENG means electronic news gathering. These cameras or in this type of recordings, it's desirable to record as much as possible. So the artistic element of selective blur is not desired, but it is desired to have as much as possible in sharp in the image. and a small sensor helps in this regard. And if you have a presenter in the front and some kind of action going on in the back, you can record the presenter in the front and the action in the back, both in focus. You won't be able to get the action from the big distance, to zoom in from a very big distance to the action. If you have a big sensor, you would need a huge lens to do that. With a small sensor, you can have a decent sized zoom lens and still have a big reach. For example, this camera, the XA70, it has a built-in zoom lens, which has a focal length from 8.3 millimeters up to 124.5 millimeters. This is a full frame equivalent of a 25.5 to 382.5 millimeters. So actually it has a 124.5 millimeter on the long end. So if we look at this 125, the front lens is here. That means the rear lens is somewhere here. So I guess the sensor may be here on this level somewhere. So you see most of the length of the body is actually the lens, and here at the end of the camcorder sits the sensor. So why must have the camcorder the full length of the optic on the long side? Because the real video lenses, like in camcorders, are parfocal. That means they don't change their focus point when you zoom in and zoom out. But in order to do that, you need a lens that always keeps its full length. You cannot shrink it down like on some compact point and shoots where the lens will go out like a telescope. These kind of lenses are not parfocal. So let's assume that we would put a full frame sensor in this body. I think a body itself would be big enough to hold a full frame sensor. But if I still want to have the same kind of flexibility with the lens, so I want a 25 to 400 millimeter lens. So let's get the ruler out. 400 millimeters. It's like this. So the rear element is still there. So how big does the camcorder need to be? You see, it's ridiculous. Look how huge. I don't even get it on the frame. Look, that's how long it would need to be, the camcorder. It would be like a baseball bat. That wouldn't make any sense. So that's the reason why camcorders have smaller sensors. One of the reasons why camcorders have smaller sensors, because you want to have more in focus, because you are documenting on less artistically recording, and because you want to have the flexibility with the focal length, and if you want to have reach with if you're documenting, a lot of times you are somewhat far away from the action. You want to get reach, you want to get close, you need a long lens at the long end and wide on the wide end, and with a full frame sensor this thing would become abnormal huge, completely useless. And I think the XA50 is already on the large side. I wouldn't like it to be even bigger than that. I think that's already pretty large. If it would be larger, then it really would lose its benefits of being a easy to use full system. So what are the advantages of camcorders? Camcorders are in general much cheaper compared to a complete system of a system camera, which has a equal set of properties like focal length, ND filters, etc. A good camcorder costs approximately as much as the camera part alone of a system camera. So just the camera part without lenses, without anything else. Most high quality camcorders have ND filters, which you can set. Camcorders have smaller sensors and therefore can create a depth of field, a larger depth of field without stopping down. That means more in the picture is in focus. That's good for documentary or news content, where as much as possible should be in focus. Batteries and memory cards can always be exchanged, even if the device is on a tripod or has a plate, like this one has a plate mounted. And while the IC adapter is attached, you can even swap the battery while it is filming. So if I'm filming and I have the IC adapter attached, so it runs from the wall, I can change the battery without the camera stopping, without removing it from the tripod. The optics which come with the camera, designed for video. So with system cameras you can attach all kind of optics, but most optics, since system cameras are derived from stills photography cameras, most optics are focused on stills photography, and lenses for video photography have their own type of needs. They should be parfocal, so that means that no matter that if you focus on something and change the focal length, it doesn't lose focus. So I can zoom in completely on a detail, focus on it, zoom out, it will stay focused completely. That's parfocal called. Video lenses should have power zoom and power focus, so not manual. You can also have manual focus and manual zoom, but lenses which are designed to be manually zoomed and manually focused on video cameras are very, very expensive lenses because they have to be built to very high precision, and then you need focus pullers, someone who is pulling the focus, a person, or you have motorized it in a way that you can change focal length, you can change focus during filming without making any noise, without making any vibrations. That's important for a video lens. And since this is fixed completely together, the optics and the camera are matched up, so all the errors of the optics like CAs and distortions can be removed digitally in the system without you even knowing it. So it really looks great, the image. With a system camera, you will have to do that all by yourself. You will have to remove all the lens errors. You will have to apply the profiles or figure it out yourself how to remove the lens errors. You will need different lenses for different focal lengths. Every lens has its own contrast, its own colors, its own type of bokeh, its type of how the not in focus area is looking. You have to match that up somehow that it looks homogeneous. With this type of camera you don't have to do that. It's just one set. Since you cannot remove the optics, there is no way for dirt to get on the sensor. It's sealed. It's not watertight, but it's dustproof. Also the stabilization works perfectly with this setup. very good image stabilization, and everything is perfectly adjusted to each other from factory. You as a user don't have to adjust anything. Of course, the lens is parfocal, it zooms and focuses absolutely silent. High quality camcorder also come with a good internal audio recorder, and like this one with XLR inputs. Camcorders usually have a built-in high quality viewfinder and display which can turn to the front, so you can watch yourself recording. Camcorders designed to record for very long periods of time. They have long battery lives, they never get hot, and they come with a good option to run them from the wall. So to plug them in the wall, so you can run the camcorder and stream to the internet for hours and hours and hours, or I mean even days and weeks. It doesn't get hot, it doesn't get tired. You never have problems with connecting components to each other because it's completely set up. There's nothing you have to figure out how to connect. The only thing which for this camcorder which I had to connect was the microphone, but it's a no-brainer. It's just the cable. There is no connection issue here. So the camcorder is a device. You pick it up, you turn it on, you film. You don't have to think about anything. Do I have the right equipment with me? Is it set up right? Do I have all the different types of batteries and adapters and stuff? No. You need a SD card. You have to make sure that the battery is charged. That's it. There's nothing else. It has the camcorders usually have long range zoom with wide angle and telephoto end. This one, for example, has a very close-up focus distance, so you can actually focus on dirt on your lens. So if there is dust on your lens, you can focus on it. You can put it sharp. So there is basically the close focus distance on this device is 0. Basically, it's as close as you can get. Most camcorders also have the ER mode, where you can swivel out the ER filter out of the light path, and so you can record in complete darkness. That doesn't look very good, of course, but it can be useful in documentary style situations. So what is the ER filter? Sensors, like in these cameras, can record infrared light. ER stands for infrared. Humans cannot see infrared. So in order to create an image that looks like we are used to look into the world, the cameras need a filter which filters out the infrared light, so they create an image we recognize as the world we know it. If it gets very dark, if there is very little light left, visible light left, you can remove the infrared filter, and there is enough light for recording, but this time it's infrared light. This will create a black and white or green and white image, which will look very unfamiliar to us. But if you just want to document something, like some kind of animals in the night in the wood or whatever, you can do that. And with a system camera, you would have to buy a camera which doesn't have a ER filter or remove it. But there is no fast way for a system camera to change between infrared videography and not infrared videography. With camcorders, it's just the slide of a button. But then, what are the advantages of a system camera? That sounds like camcorders are the best. The system cameras have usually the larger sensor, and they are very flexible. The system camera is only the camera part of a whole system, and with the bigger sensor, they can, and the more sophisticated image processing and the more sophisticated file formats and all the possibilities to add high quality components like high quality lenses and other things to it, they can create the best possible video. And with a system camera setup, you could in theory record a video in Hollywood film, in Hollywood blockbuster quality. Also, of course, with the bigger sensor, you have a narrower depth of field, which can be used as an aesthetic element, or it can be used to put selective sharpness as a kind of narrative element, or to put the attention of the audience on something. So the system cameras are for sure the cameras you would use for any kind of artistic films or high quality movies. So system cameras usually have a larger sensor and can therefore produce much better video quality. And if you want a smaller depth of field, and this is good for productions with an aesthetic appeal, and or to use selective sharpness as a narrative tool or to draw attention to something. The system cameras often have a lot more options for video files and have more bit depth. That means you really get video data you can heavily work with in post-production without losing image quality. System cameras can be combined very flexible with many different components. These components will significantly influence and change and amplify the capabilities of the and properties of the complete system, of the full system, like high quality lenses. And system cameras are a lot of times also very good photographic stills cameras. So because they are based on stills cameras, so you also get a very high quality still photography camera with a system camera. Make a production, make a high quality video of some sorts for some kind of production or something like this. Probably the system camera is your way to go. You can in theory create Hollywood style blockbuster movie files with a system camera. But again, I have to say camcorders and system cameras are not opponents, or they are not, you do not choose in between them. You choose based on what kind of work you are doing. And if in the future I would decide to make more work which is more like a production style with more controlled settings, with higher demand on video quality, then I would get additionally to this camera a system camera. And the camcorders are the point and shoot videography style, and the system cameras are the production videography style. So this explanation of the differences actually also say why I have chosen a camcorder. I personally don't film productions. I am a one-man crew. I'm working alone. I like to shoot videos in the nature, like documentaries. I like to make ambience, sometimes little bit things like interviews, or I film myself. And I want a camera where I don't have to think about settings or anything like that, or very much about settings. I want an easy camera. This is a complete set. It's carefree. I don't need any other people. I can do what I want. I don't have to think about the camera a lot. I just start recording and I can be confident that the files, the movie files right straight out of the camera are immediately usable and they look great. And when in some point in the future I would like to make some kind of productions with more demanding, more higher ideas of image quality, video quality, then I may get additionally some kind of system, but I don't see that for me in the future now. So why did I get this camera, the XA50 from Canon? There are also other companies like Panasonic and Sony which produce camcorders. I think it's personal taste. I looked at the different products in the 2,000 euro range. A lot of people say that Canon is locking its customers out of the capabilities if they don't want to spend high amount of money. Don't know if this is true or not, but I can say that the product, and the product is not the camera but the video clips which are coming out of the camera, at Canon is very good. It's what I expected from this kind of camera. The files are, no matter if it's indoor, outdoor, daylight, little light, overshadows, overcast, the colors and the contrast always look good. They look like you would expect it. You can immediately use it on YouTube or whatever. So that's what I expected from this kind of camera. That's what I got. And when I looked at other products, for example from Sony or Panasonic, especially Sony, I think always had the best technology, but you also have to know how to use it. And I think that Sony, with the alpha style cameras, they go more the route of power users, I would like to say, or users who want to work with the video files afterwards. It seems to me that they offer a lot of different video files with very high bit depth and very low contrast and low gamut, and how they think, I think they call it. But of course, these video files, they are meant to be worked with. They are meant to be you need post-production, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted something which looks great out of camera. And when I looked, for example, at the Sony FDR AX700, that's a camcorder very similar to this one from Sony, and I looked at the videos right out of cam. I noticed, especially in good lighting situations, but in general the footage looks much crisper on the Sony. It seems to have more detail, more sharpness to it. But when the light wasn't good, I had the impression that the image was falling apart, especially the colors, and the high sharpness increased the perception of the grain, of the noise, in a not good way. And with the Canon, with this camera, even if the light is very bad, I still get an image where I think the colors are right, the contrast is right. That's how I, as a person, are viewing the scene in the same way the camera produces the video. It's exactly what I'm expecting. And the Canon doesn't reach the crispness and sharpness of the Sony, although they have the same resolution, but I guess that Sony has put more emphasis on sharpness. But I think that Canon overall, the equilibrium, the balance of sharpness, colors, contrast, the package as a whole, the sensor, the optical system, the processing of the image files, it's more balanced. it creates the more homogeneous files, the more it's what I expected. So I've chosen the Canon. So then the other question is, there are different camcorders from Canon. This one has the 1-inch sensor, and there are other models with smaller sensors. So what are the differences? Well, the camcorders with the smaller sensors, they are more they're smaller. They're considerably smaller than this one. That is, I think, is a big advantage of the smaller ones. They also have a more depth of field. They have more a wider field of focus. So for documentary, you will have it's easier to get everything in focus. And they are also cheaper. With the 1-inch sensors, you get a little bit of you get somewhat better image quality because the sensor is bigger, and you get a little bit of possibility to play with depth of field, with selective focus. Yeah, there is a little bit of possibility, but for me the main advantage was that the 1-inch sensor has the same surface area as the Super 16mm film back in the day, and these films were used for nature documentation. The 60mm cameras, because 35mm camera setup would be just too heavy to go to Africa, to the jungle or somewhere else. And also for documentaries, they used 16mm, and for action scenes in Hollywood movies, they used the 60mm because the cameras are much lighter, much smaller than the 35mm. And so I thought that the 1-inch sensor is, since it looks like 60mm, or has the looks of a 60mm camera, I like that idea. So I chose the 1-inch sensor camera. But of course it's a big camcorder. It shouldn't be bigger than that. I think it is. It has the maximum size for amateur camcorder I would accept. I wouldn't like it to be bigger than it is. So shortly after I bought this, in the end of 22, Canon released a new set of camcorders. So this one is called XA50, and Canon released in the beginning of 23 a camera which is called XA70. There are also a model XA55 and a model XA75. The models which have a 5 in the end are basically the same like the ones with the 0 at the end. The only difference between them is that the models with the 5 have a 3G SDI output here at this position. Here at this position, here you see it's blank, but on the 5 models there is a connector, and this connector is for a video output which is used for professional broadcast. So if you don't know if you need it, then you probably don't need it. You will spare yourself a few $100, but if you want to use this type of camcorder, is the some kind of low-end professional use. At least Canon is saying that. So some people might want to use it for professional broadcast outlet, and then they would like to have this professional video output. But most people, YouTubers, don't need that. I'm a more or less private film YouTuber. I'm a YouTube film creator, so I don't need professional broadcast video output. So then we are left with the difference between the XA80, XA50 and XA70. A lot of people, me included, were a little confused by the release XA70 because it seems to be the exactly same camera. The difference between the 50s and 70s are not very big. The only differences they made are the screen on the XA70 is bigger. To be honest, the screen on the XA50 is quite small, but still usable. Because the screen is bigger, the infrared sensor for the remote control was lost, so the XA70 has no sensor for infrared remote controls. It means the XA70 has no means, since it also doesn't have Bluetooth, it has no means to be remote controlled without cable. The XA70 also has a somewhat larger viewfinder, but I think the difference is not that big. The difference on the flip out screen is big. I think the resolution is much bigger on the new screen. What I have seen, I haven't touched a XA70, but I have the impression that the color accuracy of the old screen is a little bit more accurate than the new screen. The new screen seems to me to have some kind of blue tint, but maybe that's just impression. And a lot of people were thinking, why would Canon release a new camcorder which has only updated the screens and lose the remote control? That why call it a new name? The reason is here in this position. That's the real difference. So you see the XA50 has a old school DC in, a proprietary connector, look like this, so no USB-C for charging. The XA70 has a USB-C charging possibility. And that's the reason why they brought out the XA70. Because there is the new European Union Directive 2014/53 EU of the European Parliament. And this says that from December 28th, 2024 onwards, all mobile devices such as mobile phones, tablets, digital cameras, headphones, headsets, handheld video game consoles, portable speakers, e-readers, keyboards, mice, portable navigation systems, and earphones have to be charged via USB-C. So it was so Canon is updating its product range to have USB-C. So the reason why they brought out the new camcorders, Canon, is because they had to include now the USB-C cable. I think that shows us that Canon doesn't have a new camcorder in the pipeline which comes out the next 2 years, because if they had a new camcorder in the making, they wouldn't update the XA50 to USB-C. They would just keep it like it is, and the new camcorder would have the USB-C, and that's it. Yeah, so they updated the XA50 to USB-C. So for me, that means we don't have to expect a new Canon camcorder next 2 or 3 years. I think the standardization of USB-C, I think it's generally a good idea. In this specific case, I think the old cable has some advantages. I think it's mechanically more robust because it doesn't stick out as long as the USB-C, and it can rotate. The USB-C cannot rotate, and this makes it mechanically more sensitive to accidental tearing of the cable. Canon obviously knows this weak point and introduced an extra clip on the camera to keep tension away from the USB-C connector. This can also be seen here in the XA70 manual. A difference which is important for me between the XA50 and XA70 is the XA70 doesn't have anymore the infrared sensor. So the XA50 comes with a remote control where you can control different things like record, start, stop, zoom in, zoom out. You can navigate the menu, and you can switch display between seeing the data and seeing only the screen, and you can review footage. So I think the remote control is one of the absolute benefits of a camcorder. A lot of camcorders come with a remote control, especially if you're recording yourself. You can adjust the frame with the zoom settings. You can start stop without standing up. It's really very good. So, and you can also control the camera from a distance. So if you record some kind of animal that doesn't feel comfortable with people around, you can control the camera from hiding. And since the sensor is on the screen, it will always look at you. If you are standing behind the camera, it looks at you. If you're recording yourself, it will look at you. So you can always control this camera with the remote control. So the XA70 doesn't have Bluetooth, it doesn't have an infrared receiver sensor anymore. The only way to remote control the XA70 is like the XA52, a cable-bound remote control, which is quite has a lot of functions. It's additional piece of equipment you have to buy and order, and I don't know how long the cable is, but it's for sure not as long and convenient as the infrared remote control. So now let's have a look at the features of the XA50, and these features also apply to the XA70. So the only difference in features, as I mentioned, is the remote control. The XA70 has better display and viewfinder, but the functions are absolutely identical. There's no difference. The same menu, the same hardware, everything is same. So, and I don't want to give you a full description of the camera because that would be way too extensive. For a full description, see the manual and specifications on the Canon website. So let's start with the tour around the camcorder. The camcorder in general is quite large, I think. It shouldn't be larger for my taste. If it would get even larger, then it would start to lose the advantage over the system camera. So I'll start here at the back. Here sits the extendable, and you can extend the viewfinder, you can swivel it upwards. You don't have to put it upwards to look through it, but you have to extend it in order to look through. It doesn't work if it's put in. It also stops working if you fold out the display. When this is folded out, that isn't working anymore. And there is no way in the menu to activate this again as long as the display is folded out. But I think that's working fine this way. Right to it, we have the main record button. On the left, there's a small joystick. With this joystick, you can navigate the menu system when you're using the built-in viewfinder, and you don't want to use the display because the display is has touch function. Otherwise, if you folded out the display, you would use the touch function on the display. On the back, there are also additional buttons. There are additional buttons all over the camera here too. They can be programmed. Here is the battery. It does have 1700 milliamperes. I can record about 120 minutes with it. There is also a larger size with more capacity available. You can remove the battery while it is mounted on a tripod, or if you have a quick release plate like I have now mounted on it, it's no problem. You can still exchange it. Same is true with the SD cards. You can access them and change them even if it is mounted on a tripod. And when you have plugged in the camcorder with the power supply, you can also record, and while recording change the battery. So that's no problem. Here is the main switch, where you can switch, where you can turn it on and switch between camera recording and media, which means playback of the files. Here we have the fold out display. I don't know exactly the resolution, but it's not very high, but good enough. And I think it's acceptable. It shouldn't be any worse, but for me it's still acceptable. The XA70 has a much better display. Also, I think that on this smaller display the colors are actually more accurate, but I may have an error there. Here there is the slider for the infrared, night shot, functionality, and some other buttons. Here we see the buttons which control the ND filters, and other controls. You can switch for the control wheel, the big one, between focus and zoom function. Here I have a small turnable knob. I can program, set here shutter speed, gain or ISO, and aperture, and change between them with this button. Here, like I said, a multifunction ring. I can control with it focus or zoom. Here in the front there is the removable hood. It has also built in a gate to open it. Okay, and here is the lens. It is zoom. It has focal length of 8.3 to 124.5 millimeters, which corresponds to a full frame equivalent of approximately 35.5 to 382.5 millimeters. I've screwed on a protective filter from Canon. It doesn't do anything optically, it's just a protection. And the hood fits over the protective filter, so Canon thought this very well through. I have the hood, I have the barrier, I have the protective filter, so it's really well protected, the lens. The optical quality of the lens is surprising good, even for the price. I paid about 2,000 euros for this camera, and I'm still amazed how good the optical quality of this system is and how good the videos come out. It has a long zoom range, a wide zoom range, but it still has a very good optical quality. I was surprised.
I was also surprised by the close focus capabilities of this camcorder. I make this little demonstration. I can basically focus on something that it's basically touching the lens, the protective filter.
Here we see the built-in stereo microphone. The sound is okay, it's good actually, but since there is a image stabilization going on, there is always some kind of buzzing sound here audible from the built-in microphone. So if you want good audio, you need an external microphone. So on the other side, as we see the slot for the two SD cards and the button which releases the door. As you can see, you can access the cards without, even if the camera is mounted on a tripod, no problem. Underneath here we have a cover. Under this cover we have the HDMI out, we have USB, we have microphone in, so 3.5 millimeters, and audio out for the monitor, for the audio monitor. On the 5 models, on the 55 or 75 models, there would be the additional video output for broadcast. Here is nothing. Then we have the adjustable wrist strap. Here is the small speaker. That's the main zoom rocker. Here behind it we see a switch where you can switch between full auto and manual. That's often helpful when you want to record something quickly and you want to make sure that some setting you made doesn't screw up the recording. So you can change a lot of the settings, and if you come in a situation where you don't have the time to redo all the special settings, you just switch it to auto and it will record in a neutral color tone and everything will be set to automatic. The only thing which will not be set to automatic is if you are recording with the external microphone and you have set the channels to manual, then the levels which are manually dialed in here will be recorded. So if you want full auto even with the external microphone, then you would have to switch the channels to auto 2. Here we have the cover for the power adapter and the cable bound remote control. And on top we have a screwed on grip, a detachable handle. This handle has its own zoom rocker, its own record button and a safety for it. It has 2 XLR inputs, channel 1, channel 2, input 1, input 2. And on the other side it has a small mixer where you can mix up the 2 channels. The microphone you see here and the cable are not part of this set. I bought them separately. The microphone is a Audio-Technica XA70R shotgun condenser microphone, and that's a 0.3 meter XLR cable, and I'm very happy with this combination. I get very good results. So now I would like to introduce you to the main functions of the camcorder. So I show you what I would do to record a video. So first of all, I open the gate for the lens so light can come in. Then I switch the camera, switch on, put it on camera mode. So and after approximately 2 seconds it's ready to record. I now use the camera in manual mode. Generally you can choose between different resolutions. You can use full HD with 17 Mbps. You can use full HD in 35 Mbps. Both are available in 25 or 50 frames per second, and you can use 4K full HD. You can use 4K Ultra HD in 25 frames per second with 150 Mbps. If I don't have anything special in mind, I usually pick up the smallest size because I usually don't post-process my videos, and for YouTube, that usually is good enough. And I don't have to think about data sizes, and that's just carefree. If I want the video to be of somewhat better quality, I would take this one. 4K I basically never use. I choose the right white balance. I pick daylight, but of course you can also set a specific color temperature, or you can set the color temperature with a white balance setting, so with a gray card or something like this. But I put it on daylight. As colors, I use the program CP4, and there I use the EOS standard BT.709 production camera, C4 EOS standard. So I like the colors. They are has a little bit more contrast and colors than the standard color theme. And if you also own EOS system camera, you can match up very good the footage from this camcorder to the footage of the system camera, the EOS system camera. I think for me it's not an issue, but for others that may be very handy. As exposure program, I use exposure time priority, TV. There are of course other possibilities too, like program, AV and manual. I can use this wheel to set the exposure time. I put it to 1/50. If I would choose manual, I can use this wheel and this button. I would use the wheel to change, for example, the gain, and the button to switch between the different settings like aperture, exposure time and gain. But as I said, I use TV, and so the camera will pick gain and aperture by itself. If I want to have more control over everything, I go to manual again. I choose my aperture I like, I choose the shutter speed I need, and I would choose the gain. There's a lever here down where I can choose the right exposure, and in this case you see it's on the right still, it's too bright still, so I would have to insert an ND filter. It comes down a little bit. Now it's just, it would be the exposure meter tells me it's just right. I could increase the ND filter even more and turn on the gain. So with gain and ND filters, you can adjust the exposure how you need it. And changing the ND filter is really just the press of a button, plus minus here, plus minus here. But I put it back to TV. The focusing is usually automatic, autofocus. But you can intervene at any time. You can I can use this ring to change the focus point forward or backward. and after a few short time it will go back to autofocus. With this technique I could switch between different possible focusing points. So for example, if there is plants in the foreground and it's starting to focus in the foreground, but I want to focus on the deer in the background, then I could use this trick to force it to focus on the deer in the background. Other possibility, which I like even more, is that I focus in like I've done here, and with this button I programmed switching between autofocus and manual focus. So I'm focusing in, then I turn off autofocus, and then I zoom out, and now I know it will stay focused on what I have focused when I zoomed in, and because the optics is parfocal, it won't change the point of focus even if I zoom out again. So zooming I can do with this zoom rocker, of course. I can do it with the one above. I can use the remote control, or I could switch here to zoom control and zoom with the ring. And every zoom option can be adjusted in the menu system to achieve a different zoom velocity. So I could say that that's for fast zooming, that's for slow zooming, that's for very slow zooming, and the remote control zooming is just its own zoom rocker on the remote control. It's for medium speed zooming or something like this. Zooming and focusing is silent and can be done during recording without, especially if you record with the external microphone, you won't hear the zooming and focusing while you're recording. If I would like to use the built-in viewfinder, I pull it out and close the display, then it will be active. When I open the display again, it will turn off itself. So, but in this case I don't use that. As you can see, on the top I have the microphone. I've connected it on input 1 with the external grip handle. That's a mono microphone, so it means the mono audio signal comes in at channel 1. This camcorder is 4 channels. Channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3 and 4 are the built-in stereo microphone. So I have the setting that the signal from channel 1 is mirrored in channel 2, so I have the mono audio on both channel 1 and 2, so I don't have a real stereo, but I have audio on both left and right. My setting for the audio mixer is for input 1. Starting from the bottom, I have mic plus 48 volts that's the phantom. It's the phantom power for the microphone. It does need that. It doesn't have its own power source, but it's good because I don't need an extra battery for the microphone this way. Then input 1, of course, and I switched it to manual. That means that the audio level is controlled by this wheel. On input 2, I have set it on mic and input 2, and on manual 2. And in the menu system, I set it up in such a way that input 2 takes as source input 1. That means it's mirrored. And so I can adjust input 2 with this wheel with this wheel. So I could have different levels for left and right if I wanted. So before I start recording, I will look at the audio levels. I will make sure that the maximum peak is somewhere here. It's a little bit too loud now. I would reduce it to like 4, a setting of 4 on both sides. Then I think it's, yeah, maybe it's even now a little bit too not loud enough, but you can play around with it. You just have to make sure that it never clips, that it never hits the right side, because then that means it clips, and that sounds awful. If you leave it at auto, yeah, then it will adjust itself to the volume, but that sounds weird, especially if you have a permanent sound in the background, like a refrigerator. The permanent sound, which should be stable and equally loud all the time, changes its volume, pretending on the overall sound amount. So if you have the time to set it up properly, then put it on manual. It will sound much better, much more professional. So I have checked the audio levels; they are okay, and so I'm all fine now. Usually, since I don't change my settings, I don't have. It takes a lot of time. I take it out of the bag, and I start recording immediately, because I know it's just right. So when I'm ready, I just push this button. I get the red light, which means it's recording. I have also the red light in the front, and so I'm recording. I press record again. It stops recording. Stops flashing. To review the clips, it's very easy. Just put the slider in media, and after a short while you see all the media that has been recorded on this day, which is just this one, and you press it and it starts playing. So if you need additional information, just check out the manual or the homepage of Canon. There you will find additional information and documentation for the XA50 and the XA70. So what could a complete set for a camcorder look like? I would like to show on my example of my backpack. There is everything in it. I also store my camcorder in here, and you will see it's quite easy. Here's my wetsuit. I will talk about it later. A poncho, a wetsuit for myself, and the whole backpack. I and backpack fit under the wetsuit, under the poncho. I have a monitor, audio with a 3.5mm connection in it, headlamp, something for cleaning off the dust, the power supply and charging cable, the camcorder itself, a wind monitor. It fits. This one came with the microphone, and this one I bought afterwards. I'm very happy with it. It completely blends out any wind noise, but it still doesn't sound very dull. I think the audio is still very clear, even with that huge thing on it, on top of it. So what do I have with me still? I have a remote control. I have a spare battery, and additional cleaning textile, a case for SD cards, and they are empty, and a data cable connection to connect the camcorder to a PC. So that's it. That's the whole setup for videography. There's everything you need for a camcorder. This is the tripod I'm using. It's a Manfrotto MVK500AM. This tripod, in my opinion, is a very good compromise between weight and price and features. I think it's stable enough to use it for simple stationary work, and it's still light enough to go on like long hikes with it. And it's not very expensive too. It's just it's 400 euros. So yeah, of course you know that video tripods are more expensive than still photography tripods because they have to be more stable. And I think this one actually is a very good compromise. You have a big blade, you can secure it. Of course, you can. It's not perfect, but it's good Manfrotto typical quality. A lot of the parts are plastic, but don't be afraid. It's a high quality plastic and keeps the weight down, and it's still stable enough. So let's talk about the camrade wetsuit. I often walk through nature with the camera mounted on my tripod or in my hand to make pictures and to be ready to get a shot. And often in nature it happens that there is coming a little bit of rain, or there are coming droplets from the trees down of previous rain, or it snows, and I'm worrying then that my camera will be damaged by unfortunate intrusion of water. And in order to be able to film with good confidence in wet environments, I got myself a wetsuit for the camera. It's manufactured by Camrade in France. It's specifically tailored to the XA50 and XA55, but the very same will of course fit also for the XA70 and 75. It costs around 200 euros. It was hard to find a seller who would sell it to me, because actually that's something for professional use. So they usually only sell to companies. They don't sell, most of the vendors of this don't sell to privates. But I found a company who sold it to me, and I waited, I think 3 months or something like this for it. But then it was ready and I got it. So putting it on is a little takes a little bit time, and you should do it not outside in the wet, but somewhere where you're protected from humidity, maybe before you're going out, or in the tent or in the car or somewhere. And but once you have it on, you can leave it on, because you can operate the camera very good even when it's mounted. And now I will mount it for you so you can see how it is made and how long it takes. First, I'm taking it out. It comes in this bag. The wetsuit itself is made from a fabric which is soft, and when the droplets hit the fabric, it doesn't make really sound. So and if you move the fabric, it's not very loud too, so you can you don't get a lot of noise from the fabric while you are working with the camcorder. Okay, in the camcorder I remove this thing, and I remove the hood. up. A little bit cumbersome to do it while I'm recording it because of the strange way I'm holding the camera now. I also removed this cable here. In order to put it better on here. Just to make sure that the lens goes down here. And then you make sure that this thing goes over the cable. This thing goes over the part of the handle here. Now you can fasten this here so no water comes in. And take out the viewfinder. Push this over the viewfinder and close that properly. It's difficult to do it while I'm recording it because it's a little unusual position to do it. But you see basically now it's protected from water dropping down from above. It has opening here. I can stick my hand here through it. I can operate it this way. I can look at the display like that. I can turn it on. Or I can use the built-in viewfinder. I can operate the zoom rocker. I can operate the record button, or I can access the menu. I can also use the joystick if I want. So That's how it looks like. You can also, of course, access the side, the handle here, like this. And I can use the viewfinder like that. I also have access to my audio inputs. I can change them here. And I can mount it on a tripod. So I can put it like it is now on a tripod and carry it around, and it is protected from droplets. That's the wetsuit, and I can leave it like this and work with this like this.
So these were my thoughts about the XA50 and XA70 and about camcorders and system cameras in general. And I wanted to show you why camcorders still exist in 2023 and what their place and purpose is in videography. Okay, bye.